In this lecture we're going to be looking at words connected with time. And here are your 7 words: consecutive, successive, penultimate, intermittent, periodic, concurrent, and coincide. So here is your first word: consecutive. Consecutive. If events are consecutive, they happen one after the other. So for example, this is the 3rd consecutive year that Barcelona have won La Liga. So they won it last year, and this year, and the year before. 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 are consecutive numbers. Photographs, taken at the same time on consecutive days, can be quite different from one another. So we often talk about consecutive years, consecutive days, consecutive numbers, and consecutive defeats or victories. Consecutive is an adjective, so you can turn it into an adverb: consecutively. And some synonyms for consecutive: sequential, successive, one after another. Your next word is successive. Successive, which is similar to consecutive. Again, it means something happens one after another, without a gap as well, same as consecutive. So you pronounce it successive, successive. So again, here's that same sentence again, but with successive. This is the 3rd successive year that Barcelona have won La Liga. Means exactly the same as consecutive. Greece was suffering from the failure of successive governments to curb the debt. Smith was the winner for the 3rd successive year. We can talk about 3rd successive, 2nd successive, 4th successive, successive governments, successive defeats, successive years. And again, it's an adjective, so you can turn it into an adverb: successively. So some synonyms for successive: consecutive, sequential, one after another again. Here's your next word: penultimate. Penultimate. The penultimate item in a series is the 2nd to last item, the last but one. So in this queue, the man on the left, he's at the front. The penultimate person in the queue is this lady here. She's the 2nd to last person, the last but one, the penultimate. Penultimate, it actually comes from the word ultimate, which can mean the best, also the furthest away. And the prefix pen can mean almost. So penultimate actually means almost the last, almost the furthest. Some examples here. The murder took place during the penultimate scene of the play. Juventus clinched the title in the penultimate game of the season. Clinch means won. So in the 2nd to last game, there was one game left. They'd already won the title. He gave his speech on the penultimate day of the conference. So we can talk about penultimate round, penultimate stage, penultimate phase, penultimate chapter. And some synonyms for penultimate: 2nd to last and last but one. Here's your next word: intermittent. Intermittent. Intermittent is something that happens occasionally and at irregular intervals. So it happens intermittently. So for example, after 3 hours of intermittent rain, the day's tennis was abandoned. So that means it rained for maybe 10 minutes, then stopped. And then it started again for half an hour, then stopped. and then it rained for 5 minutes and stopped again. So it was intermittent. It kept on stopping and starting and stopping and starting and stopping and starting. Essential maintenance work may lead to intermittent power outages. And to learn more about intermittent fasting, read The Fast Diet. Intermittent fasting is when you stop eating for a day, maybe twice a week or once a week. You can do it intermittently. So we talk about intermittent rain, also intermittent pain, where your pain goes on and it comes and goes. It goes away after a bit. Intermittent problem, intermittent fault. It's an adjective, so you can make it into an adverb intermittently. And some synonyms: occasional, sporadic, patchy, periodic, infrequent, and fitful. Fitful. Here is one of those words, in fact, periodic. Periodic is something that happens occasionally, but at fairly regular intervals. So intermittent is occasionally, but at irregular intervals. Periodic is occasionally, but at regular intervals. So, for example, periodic checks are taken to ensure that high standards are maintained, so maybe once a month or once a year. Her grandfather was suffering from periodic bouts of illness, so maybe every week or every 2 months he got sick. If her grandfather was suffering from intermittent bouts of illness, it doesn't sound as serious to me, and it only happened rarely as well. Periodic is worse. We will issue updates to the app periodically. So we can talk about periodic reviews, periodic updates, periodic reports, periodic payments, maybe once a month. If you're into chemistry, you will have heard of the periodic table of the elements. The elements in the table appear at regular intervals, so they are periodic. And periodically is the adverb for periodic. And you can also use the word periodical. Now, a periodical is a journal or a magazine that's published at regular intervals, so maybe once a month or once every 2 months. And academic journals are often called periodicals. Some synonyms for periodic: regular, at fixed intervals, recurrent, repeated, and 2 examples really of periodic. They don't mean quite the same thing, annually and weekly, but these are synonyms that might come up in reading tests, for example. Concurrent is your next word. Concurrent. Concurrent events happen at the same time, so 2 events happening at the same time are concurrent. Concurrent. And you'll see the prefix con here. Current suggests something running or moving like electric current or the current of a river. Con means with or together, so concurrent means things running or moving together. Some examples: he will be serving 3 concurrent life sentences. They launched concurrent attacks by land, sea and air, so soldiers and the ships and the aeroplanes attacked at the same time. More than 40 parties were being held concurrently in the city, all at the same time. Some common collocations: concurrent with, concurrent sentences, concurrent events, concurrent symptoms. Again, it's an adjective, so you can turn it into an adverb: concurrently. And some synonyms for concurrent: at the same time, simultaneous as well, simultaneous, coincident. And here's your next word, coincide. Coincide. So if one event coincides with another event, they happen at the same time, which is similar to concurrent, but it has a more general meaning as well, one of agreement, which we'll look at shortly. So, for example, although his mental illness had coincided with his military service, it had not been caused by it, so they happened at the same time. The start of the solar and lunar years coincide every 13 years. And the last sentence is about opinions agreeing or coinciding. Their opinions often coincide. We often say coincide with. If something coincides a lot, it broadly coincides. Frequently coincide, rarely coincide. Coincide is a verb, so coincides, coinciding, coincided. Coincidence is a noun that comes from coincide. So when two or more related things happen at the same time, but by chance, it's a coincidence. So coincide. Concurrent is a synonym for coincide. Go along with. Coexist. Correspond. So there are your 7 time words: consecutive, successive, penultimate, intermittent, periodic, concurrent, and coincide.